Alright everybody, I've been so excited to get home to do this video because it's going to show off my nerdiness, but to not bore you, I want to explain that even though there's some science going on here, it's going to explain to you why, one, you need to listen to the Steve Reich's phase experiments on speakers, not headphones, why Beatle bootlegs sometimes are rip-offs, how you can listen to this and ruin this Elvis album, what Brian Eno is talking about on his little drawing, and all about quad, not to mention just general speaker positive negative stuff. So today I'm going to be talking about phase and how that refers to everything I just said. Right now, when we talk about phase with a recording, we're talking about, sound waves are an AC wave, right? Just like your electricity, there's a positive and a negative, right? And on a speaker, cone, right, we have a positive and a negative, okay? Because there's a magnet, and right now it's in the neutral, and when, a positive signal comes, it pops out, and when a negative signal comes, it pops in, okay? And by moving, it moves air, and that's how we listen to stuff. Okay? Pretty simple. Now, if we listen to a recording and we've got our wires hooked up, it's zagging when it should zig and zigging when it should zag. Okay? And you won't hear, it'll sound maybe muffled because the air is not moving in the right direction, but otherwise it's kind of working. A lot of people won't notice. And car installers, who install speakers, my brother is one, they'll take a 9-volt and they'll put it to the wires to make sure the wires are pushing out. So if the positive is on the positive, you'll see the speaker cone actually just push out and stay out. And if it's hooked up the wrong way, it'll suck in. So that's how they can figure out the wiring with, in case the colors are messed up or they don't remember or whatever. That's how they test. Okay. So getting that out of the way. Now if you had a speaker wired up one way and the other speaker hooked up the other way, what are you doing? You're sending some of the signal wrong. You're sending it out of phase, okay? Out of phase, right? So, you can check right now, there are a lot of great things you can do when you listen to something out of phase. Now, if you're listening on headphones, all right, the air is not going to interact the way, it does in real life, okay? So, you listen to out-of-phase recordings, all of a sudden it starts sounding wonky. Why? Because if something's dead in the middle, right, one speaker is pushing out, the other speaker is pushing in, the air is colliding, right? +1, -1 equals 0. So all of a sudden things start disappearing, okay? And this is where the Beatle bootleg stuff comes in. You can check right now on YouTube. It's real easy. Look for Beatles out of phase stereo. And all they did was they took a stereo track, kept one signal the one way, in Audacity or whatever sound, they inverted the other one and put the two together. So the things that are common in the middle disappear. Not everything does though. Right? Not everything is perfectly in phase in the studio. They try their best. Tapes are misaligned, signal capacitance between, the different, it doesn't work out perfectly. So when you listen to, let's say, Birthday, you can hear different vocal things you never hear in the normal track that's buried. You hear counting and breathing and coughing, and all of a sudden it sounds like a bootleg. It's not a bootleg, it's the original recording with out-of-phase stereo. And a lot of bootleggers didn't have that stuff. They did that in their little recording studio, inverted the phase on one of the speakers, put it together, made it a mono thing, sold it to you as a bootleg. It's not a bootleg. You could have done the same thing at home. Told you we'd talk about this. Okay, Steve Reich does phase experiments. Come out, and it's going to rain. Great pieces. If you listen on headphones, the phase tricks aren't going to work because the air is not interacting. It's not doing anything in your head. So you'll just hear a bunch of stuff. But when you play them both, what he's doing is taking a mono signal, playing it in one, and then just by milliseconds adjusting the other one so it's slightly slow. You can't even really tell. But when the sound collides, things that are there start interacting with each other and you start getting a whooshing sound. So when you hear about phasing on drums and sound effects, that's what that whooshing noise is, you know, like in Ichiku Park by the Small Faces, or, you know, half the stuff on Sgt. Pepper. It's because the sounds are colliding in a weird way, they're negating certain things are being strengthened by that phase relationship. So, Steve Reich, told you we'd talk about that. Next thing I said I'd talk about. So, Brian Eno, right? So what he did, he shows you, you take the positive of one, take the negative of the other, you put them together, you get a third speaker. You're getting an out-of-phase speaker. You're getting the difference of phase thrown in the back. And it actually makes interesting sounds. It doesn't really do anything to your amp. But this is a cheap way of making surround sound by using an out-of-phase trick, the positive and negative. And that's how he does it, right? That's how, so he shows you so I think that is called the Hafler circuit. So, surrounds, by doing phase tricks on a stereo recording, you're getting a third sound source. Basically what you'd get with the Beatles that I told you about, right? But in the back, amplified. So now you got this third sound source from two channels. So now we get to quadraphonic sound. You know, I forgot one. Here's the other one. So we got this realistic SQ. So what they figured out is, well, if we can play with phase and extract the weird phase information, we can get a surround track, a third and fourth track, using only two channels. And that's called a matrix surround system. You've known it for years on VHS with your Dolby Pro Logic, and your home theater has Dolby Pro Logic. Your Netflix stereo, you know, if you don't have Dolby Digital, you're using a Pro Logic surround. Your surround sound for years on TV was Dolby Pro Logic, and it's basically, Dolby Pro Logic is using the QS system, which is on this command record. ABC used QS. It's a stereo record, so you've got no problems playing this. Go right ahead and play any QS and play any SQ. Dolby Pro Logic is close to the QS system. Dolby Pro Logic 2 is close to the SQ system. They're not perfect, but they're close. What they're doing is playing with the phase of material, extracting that things that are not in phase and throwing them into the back speakers. It doesn't work great, I'll be honest with you. Dolby Pro Logic didn't work great. It works sorta, but not great. That's a matrix system. So with the positive and negative, basically, you know, if you got something in the left, you're right. Center, right, you're left. And the stuff that's sort of in between, not the fake center, but not the left, that's the stuff that's out of phase that it pulls out and sends to the back. So and some people are very particular about things that are in phase. Everything should be in phase. And it sounds weird. To most people, it doesn't sound like anything. It may sound kind of muffled every now and then. You know, people that are sensitive to phase, you know, you listen to a stereo recording, quadraphonic recording in stereo, you're like, it just doesn't sound right. And that's why. Because there's a lot of phase things going on that your very expensive amplifier in the 70s would, you know, kick out and put in the back. And, you know, like I said, there's differences between the two systems, SQ and QS. Sansui used the QS system. You know, so I think Marantz used SQ. So you can play them; they're just fine. And often, the neat thing about quad records, are that audiophiles were the only ones who could really afford these. So they were taken care of. They usually sound okay, even just in stereo. A lot of times they had to go back to the master tapes, so even though they may be, they're not always the same performance. Sometimes they're different, they take the wrong takes. And they're mixed differently. They're mixed weird. Sometimes they're actually, there could be substantial differences in the performance. So there you go. There's SQ and QS. Now here is the thing that I've been telling people about, is quadradisc and C4. These are special records. Okay. Since the matrix stuff doesn't work great, there was another third system called CD4, and quadradiscs are CD4. And this is what, basically what super vinyl, the invention of super vinyl was built from, and the Shibata stylus. What CD4s do is, somewhere around 15 kilohertz, they roll off the sound. Then, somewhere around 30 kilohertz, much higher, ultrasonic, right? They start again with the rear material. So from 30 to 40, or 30 to 45, is the rear material. You can't hear it unless you were a gnat. And to get modulations that tiny, because, high frequency is really tiny stuff. The vinyl had to be improved. So that's where super vinyl, your quad X2, basic kind of formulas come through. If you look at quadradisc records, the grooves look different. There's more of a sheen, and that's because of the high frequency material that's on here. Then the decoder takes that material that's 30 to 40, minuses the 20, and then you actually bring that ultrasonic material down into human hearing. Okay, and that's how the rear stuff works. That is called a discrete recording. That is what Frank Zappa's label is referring to on Apostrophe. That is the best kind of quad you can get. Unfortunately, it just didn't catch on because you needed a Shibata needle. It's a high, quality needle to track that high up to 40 kilohertz. I mean, you're asking a lot of a record, So, it just didn't catch on. You can play these without issue on a stereo record player, but you can be potentially damaging the very fragile grooves at 30 and 40 kilohertz. Now, you won't notice that from then on, but if you put a CD4 record back on, there might be a degradation in how much surround material is being extracted in. If you have a Shibata stylus, it's fine. Elliptical styluses are slightly related to the Shibata stylus. It's a little, rounder. I don't know if it does damage or not. But if you're buying these used, most likely they're damaged. And even if they're not, you don't have a CD4 amp. You're never going to. Don't worry about it, really. Unless you're really into quad, then you might start worrying about it. I've looked around. I've never been able to find a CD4 setup. I've never been able to afford, to make that happen. So don't worry about it. So these won't really decode into quad using your home theater. The other stuff will. So you can, do a needle drop of it, put the CD into your home theater setup, and you might get something quad-like, especially Dark Side of the Moon. If you see Dark Side of the Moon, grab it. And that's all those people did. Any of the bootleg internet stuff that you find very often is quad mixes that are done into Dolby Digital, and that's all they're doing. They're just doing it in Audacity. They're taking the phase. There's a plugin, a VST plugin that'll extract all that information. And if you're into it, you can do that without actually owning a Dolby, an SQ or a QS amp. So, I hope this stuff made sense. You have questions? Go ahead and ask. I know it's confusing, but basically the long and short of it is, quadradisc CD4 you might ruin, but not really. The other stuff, go ahead and grab them. They're usually taken care of. They sound different mixes, so sometimes that's really interesting. And you can sort of decode them in your home theater setup, and everyone's got a home theater setup, so give it a try. You got nothing to lose. And Also, don't get shortchanged by bootlegs. Or, if you are enterprising and want to play with it, take some of your favorite recordings, put in Audacity, invert them one channel, sum them together, and you'll get a different mix. Sometimes you'll get a really interesting mix. And you hear a whole bunch of flubs and mistakes that are normally covered up by the loud mono stuff. Also, this is also kind of interesting. If you happen to have an old stereo, or like me, you built your own mono switch, you play one of these quad recordings, hit your mono switch, all of a sudden, instruments will disappear. Same thing because of the phase and flipping and negating and all that. So, that's kind of neat too. That, normal stereo recordings, when you play them and hit the mono switch, they're kind of built for that combination phase, even into the late 70s, because they always still considered FM, mono for fringe areas. So they didn't do mixes, so phase problems happen. So that's when you hear all about phase and mono and compatibility, and stereo but can be mono compatible. That's all part of it too, is that phase stuff, of combining. And anyway, enough egghead stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Again, you got questions, leave a comment. I'm getting close to my 300 subscribers. I'm looking forward to it. I got the contest idea already in my head. I can't wait to do that. So that's it, everybody. Bye.